Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate you all jumping on, and I'm going to dive you through a little bit about what undefinable life design is, how you can implement it into your own life, and particularly for yourselves as grads, how it's relevant for explaining who you are, particularly if you've done a lot of things, but also for charting a direction for if you have many interests and you can go down many routes and be great at many things. How do you choose your thing? So, goals of today's session is to talk about how you can uncover your golden thread. This is a sort of purpose statement that bridges together your many interests and experiences into a direction worth following. Then we'll get some language for your uniqueness, so understand how to confidently explain a non-linear career path. So if you're looking ahead and wondering, what do I want from the world of work? It's less so now. Here's the graduate role that sets you up for the next 10, 20 years. It's going to be changing. A lot of people are moving every 1.3 to 2.2 years, Gen Z, that's pretty normal. So how do you explain a non-linear career path to yourself and to others? And then how do you introduce yourself too? So how you're then entering into those interviews, conversations, people who perhaps want to work with you if they want to hire you, or you want to be freelancing, or you want to be talking about yourself in different rooms. How do you explain yourself with a personal story that relates as well? So that's the goals of today's session, and we'll get there through working through some of the frameworks too. So yeah, a little bit about me. Why am I here? Why am I talking to you all about undefinable life design? Well, let's start a little bit about my journey. So I went to Loughborough University in 2016, studied international business, four-year degree, and in our third year, most people went on a placement year. So they went into a corporate role, often down in London, and I instead decided to take the year out to start my first business called Posty. They offered a year in enterprise program, which was a pretty cool offering. About 10 people out of the 400 or so went and took it. And I built a business called Posty, which is where you attach parcel boxes to your house to receive deliveries. I had no experience of parcel boxes or deliveries, but I built a team that did. And over that next couple of years, prototyped it, had a box on a house to receive deliveries. And it was a pretty cool experience building that. But also, I worked part time as well. Alongside that, I worked 2.5 days a week in a marketing role for a startup, and that helped pay the bills and allow me some of the headspace to work on that first business too. Then it came to 2020, which is my final year at university, and we all know what happens in 2020. We have a bit of COVID, and I am in March time, and I'm asking myself, do I want to sell parcel boxes the next 5 years? And I think not really. But I also think, what are we all doing now? We're all at home to receive deliveries. It's a bit easier than it used to be, rather than missing it and getting that sorry, we missed you slip to the post. So I closed that business in 2020. I don't know the time, but in April 2020, I start the next business called House Hack, which is an online hackathon that brought together students who just lost their summer jobs with the businesses who are now adapting to COVID. And we had different consulting teams to basically solve the problems that these businesses are facing and present back solutions, and built that then over the next 2 years into a talent accelerator. So all these companies that were then having their problems we consulted on, they were also hiring the talent through those hackathons as well. So I built that for 2 years, profitable business. Got to the end of 2021, and I was asking myself, okay, this has to adapt to a very in-person world, and to take a virtual hackathon and come to an in-person reality was a very different business proposition. And so walked away from that business at the end of 21, and then took on at the time a portfolio career of several different things. So one of my main sources of income at that time was project managing, like consulting projects. So I was doing that a few days a week, and then was also starting a newsletter, writing about what I was learning about the future of work, what I'd seen for those two businesses beforehand. And then as I was doing that, I gathered a bit of momentum and clarity on what I was writing about. And at the start of 2023 in March, everything seemed to happen in March for some reason, I launched the non-profit Undefinable Community, which I'm still leading to today. And that was for those who are in the age discovery, so 22 to 35. We do like weekend retreats, so 3 days, 2 nights out of the city. We do celebration events, and we do explorations as well, like a half day workshop. So I still run that now, and that has about 35 members based in London, and we all contribute and collectively create our spaces. It's really cool, but it intentionally doesn't pay me, but it establishes the idea of what an undefinable is. And then I joined the Portfolio Collective, which is a community of 15,000 portfolio professionals, people earning through more than one source of income. And joined them 4 days a week. Obviously, couldn't give them five because building my own portfolio career. And so the 4 days a week, that taught me a lot about what the future of careers looks like, and how some of those, particularly in their 50s, 60s, 70s, were earning a lot through these portfolio careers, particularly in advisory roles or managing a portfolio of different income streams. And so learn a lot about what they were succeeding with, and then understood that undefinable wanting to be everything, how could they have a path worth following? And so in 2025 launched the undefinable life design. Like, how do I bridge that gap between the undefinable who wants to live beyond labels and the portfolio career that enables them to succeed in a way that's true to them? And along the way, led coaching sessions, workshops, writing, everything in between, learned from some of the best in the space, and then used it all to self-publish my first book that I launched 2 months ago, which has been featured by Forbes, Amazon bestseller, and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's been a good journey getting here, and this is why I feel today is a good day to speak to you all about what it means to be undefinable, how to design your life, and how you can direct yourself in a way going forward that makes sense. So that's my journey. But how do I explain myself when someone asks me, what do I do? I say I help those who live beyond labels to design their life for uniqueness through intimate spaces, strategic transitions, and empowering systems. So, what does that mean practically? Well, like you see, it means that I lead a community. It also means that I've written a book. It also means that I've built a brand. It also means I do workshops, do keynotes. I also represented GB at Age Group Triathlon as well. And there's all these bits in between that kind of come together to understand who I am, but also how I can offer services to help others as well. So that's a little bit about me, but would love in the chat if you guys would just add in a little bit more about yourself. So it has to be like a sentence or two, but I'd love for you to ask or to answer the question. So what do you do? But you're not allowed to use your degree title. And I'll wait 30 seconds or so and I'll read out a couple of replies if you guys are feeling confident or brave enough to chuck it in this in response. Hopefully they can all reply. They can reply, can't they, Bissy?
Should be able to. I'll just double check that one.
Okay. Oh, chat is disabled. Okay. Well, that might make it a bit harder. Maybe you can add it in the Q&A. If you can answer the Q&A, you can add it in the Q&A. That's fine. I'll read it from the
Yeah,
Q&A.
I'll try and fix that one whilst you're speaking.
Yeah, so maybe answer that question. So what do you do? Click the Q&A button and let's see some of the answers that extend beyond just a degree title. Nice. I help women align their lives with biblical principles to achieve life purpose. Nice, Maria. That's cool. And yeah, I can see the words biblical principles like start bringing yourself to that sentence too. And it helps explain a little bit more about exactly where your perspective might be, but also you're saying here, women, maybe by the end of this, we'll get a bit more clarity on some of the other words that might align of like, is it a specific type of woman? Are there any particular principles? But also, what does life purpose mean to you? Is there like a one purpose or is there an evolving purpose? Like we can delve a little bit more into that throughout this session as well. So have a view of that lens. That's a great starting point though, and it's super helpful for us as well. Okay, I will keep moving forward, but if I see anyone else drop it in the Q&A, I will return back to you. But this is useful for us to come back to this too. So yeah, research. Okay, the chat works, so we can see that in there as well, which is good. So AJ says he does research. I'm sure there's a bit more to you than research. I'm sure you have some interest outside of that, but this is the starting point. Researching and writing about mindsets towards environmental protection. Nice. Okay, cool. That gives you a little bit of understanding around who you are, but also that the mindset is important to you, Alice. So I'd love to see that because sometimes the environmental protection might be as much about policy, but here it's about understanding the mindset behind it. An anonymous one, create an events company, create a flower, e-commerce, create a cleaning business, now back to studying for my Masters of Law. Okay, so you've done quite a lot. And hopefully by today we'll find a few more ways of tying those threads together. And then when 10 plus years in business journalism and tech startups in Asia, disrupted by life, interested in boring businesses that are cash flow positive and utterly unsexy. Nice. That's pretty on trend right now. I've seen a bit of that from Alex Hormozy and Daniel Priestley talking about these sort of unsexy cash flow positive businesses. So yeah, I see that and definitely makes sense. And there's an opportunity there as well. Okay, cool. Thank you all for engaging and answering either the Q&A or the chat. Both work. But these are great starting points, yeah? And that's the point is to unearth what you currently use or what you currently explain yourself with, particularly if I take away the easy answer as well. So we'll continue to progress, and by the end of today, we should get a better answer for that. That's my goal for you. Okay, so you are more than just your job title. So whatever you've added there, if you've added research, entrepreneur, student, whatever it is that you might lead with in certain conversations, that is just one part of yourself. I'm sure if I asked you what did you do last weekend, or what did you do in the evenings, or when was the last time that you felt the most joy, you might answer very differently. So ensure that you see yourself through all those labels all at once, because when you embrace all that feels like play and you overcome that fear of being a beginner, like you really embrace that there are many sides to yourself and there's no single label that defines you, no life path that you must forever follow, and no single version of success as well. So when you get that perspective that you can be many things and you can evolve past it, it frees you from just using one title as well. Obviously, titles are useful in some form in that they help us to explain ourselves to someone new, but also they are limiting in that they might restrict us at the same time. So yeah, it's not one thing forever. Life is long. There are infinite number of paths open to you. And I love this image from Wait But Why, which talks about how if we look at that today line in the middle, we look at the path behind us, that there are many paths that are now closed to us because we haven't decided to be an elite sports person at 7 years old. So being it now must be a lot harder. But actually, today going forward, there are a lot more paths still open to us as well. And this will continue to evolve and it's only becoming faster and faster than before. Think back to my dad, who has worked at the same company for 40 years, almost the exact opposite to what I'm talking about here. His generation is one of sticking with the same company, reaping the rewards. It's actually where he met my mom. It gives him his purpose. It gives him a lot of different parts of his identity all in one. But today's world is one where you, the individual, get to shape that. And that's exciting, but it also means change is inevitable and that that's built in by default. Both the companies want to use AI or automation or different forms of technology to speed up what they're building, but also you, the individual, are often jumping between the different opportunities at a much faster rate as well. And that's definitely a trend that we're seeing out in the market. So yeah, it's not one thing forever, but also it's not one thing at once either. So it's no longer just a 9 to 5 before. If I think back to, again, my dad example, literally up at, I mean, his is a bit longer than a 9 to 5. He started as a bricklayer and is now a construction director of a house building company. But his life is very much, you know, up at 6:30, out the house by 7, 7:30 is in the office and he's on site all day as well. And that's his day every day for 40 years. But that reality isn't one that we're going to experience. And over 39% of Brits are side hustling alongside their main role. So even if you do have a 9 to 5, what are you doing in the evenings and weekends? Like, are you crafting some jewelry and selling it on Etsy? It's a side hustle. Are you, selling your time to help a friend do their event? It's a side hustle. So there are a lot of different ways of earning outside of traditional just 9 to 5. And that's because we have, 168 hours in a week, and it's not limited to just the traditional working times. And that's exciting in that we get to choose it all. But it's also can be overwhelming in that how do we even begin with that much freedom? So there's 4 models that I saw when I worked at the Portfolio Collective. There's a side hustler, the one that has a 9 to 5 that also works outside of it. There's a freelancer who has several clients, but they tend to sell one service to them. And there's a multi-hyphenate who might work 2 part-time jobs that are in unrelated fields. And then there's a focused expert. So someone who is known for one thing, that they deliver many ways. And for them, that example is like, say, an employment law. They might be paid for their hourly contracted rate. They might be paid for their digital download, like PDF that they charged at £39 that you can go and buy from the internet. That's also pays them, as does their keynotes that they get paid per event, as does many other forms of income, but it all relates to their expertise in this specific domain. And what we did when we surveyed them all is we found that the focused expert, they earned twice as much. It was like £800 a day average versus the other 3 groups, which were on about £300 to £400 a day average. So they had a lot more income freedom than the other groups because they had the expertise that could enable them to exist in a category that they could charge higher rates for. And so this kind of brought together this idea of like, okay, there's many undefinables. How do I help them get their own category of one in which they're not competing with other people and that they can charge these higher rates and be more flexible and more free in how they design their week as well. So it's not one thing at once either. And often people get stuck in a dichotomy of, is it generalist? Is it specialist? Which one's better? And it's obviously a whole plethora of gray in between for one. Like you're not either generalist or specialist. I'm sure you have some specialist traits and I'm sure you have some generalist traits, but you're probably both of them together. And so what I say is look to be undefinable. So instead of being great at one thing, which You might get AI come and make redundant in several years, or you might be shallow and generalist in many things, which you find harder to monetize and add value to business. Instead, be great at a few things that you then combine together in your unique way. That is the proposition behind being undefinable. So how do we get there? How do we make sense of this world? How do we get our own way of articulating who we are? So the purpose of Acropolis is sort of starting point. And if you picture yourself in the foothills of an ascent, so the undefinable ascent is the larger metaphor. First, you must map where you're going. What is a destination? And the destination is the purpose of Acropolis that sits atop the ideal mountain of your own making. This is your ideal life that you'd like to design. And today we're going to go through the first three of these stages. So we're going to look a bit about what your many interests are. And then we'll look at the foundations. So which are the categories are you going to combine together? So if you've got the materials, almost like the bricks at the bottom there of the purpose Acropolis, the foundations then become the stack at the bottom of how do they then form into categories that make sense to you. And then how do you put the keystone at the top that holds it together? And the keystone is how do you make sense of those categories? How do you articulate a golden thread? And then the roof, how do you then cover that golden thread in a way that expresses it to the world? And that's your signature expression. And then your pillars is how do you hold together the structure that multiplies your value streams? So some value streams, it might be income streams. I'm sure you've heard a lot about them. But others might be intentionally non-monetized. So family, friends, they're also important too. But for today, we're going to stay focused on the first through third stage as well. Okay, so materials. We're going to begin at the bottom of the purpose Acropolis, put the materials in place, and it will offer us a much stronger foundation there afterwards. So your interests are your advantage. When you shrink yourself down to a single identity, you lose the access to who you are. You won't believe how much more exciting it is when someone tells me in several sentences rather than a single word what they do. It's infinitely more interesting, for one. It's also a much better conversation opener for everything else we could collaborate on. So when you just say, oh, I am doing one thing, or I am this entire identity label because I feel like this is the one you want from me in this room, it actually narrows yourself down massively. Like there's much more to you than that. And so, yeah, rather than just leading with that specific job, like look instead for interests that you already enjoy. Like start with the interest as your foundation for yes, how you explain yourself, but also for how you make sense of who you are. Like don't look at your past through just career labels. Look at it through things that you feel interested by. It's a lot more freeing that way because it then allows you to design in a way that is encompassing both life and work. So how do we get there? How do we understand these interests? Well, we're going to look at them through the lens of, I call these 5 types of interests. So define an interest as a spark of curiosity or attraction toward a topic, field, community, or way of living. There's a reason for that definition. For one, it doesn't have to be a hobby. Hobby is often something that's already in your diary. If I ask you to look back at the last month, you can probably tell me what your hobbies are because you probably do them on a repeated basis already. But interests are a lot more freeing than that. So interests can be ones that you are thinking about or you want to do in the future but haven't yet started doing. And that's really important because it then enables us to be a lot more open with what we're doing rather than starting from a kind of condition that we currently have. So the types of interests that I see, the 5 of them, one is inherited. So those that are absorbed from your upbringing, culture, or environment. So you heard before about my dad, who is a construction director. There's probably a reason why part of me loves to, build Lego, watch big construction projects on YouTube, HS2, woo, but also probably bad on the budget. So like completely irrelevant to my entire work, but I can see where I got that inherited interest from. Outdated. So these ones that once mattered but no longer feel alive to you. So for a while I was, doing triathlon for GB. And so right now I'm not doing that. And so it's a bit outdated. I still run, I still do a little bit of sport, but I'm building back up. But it's very much a different attitude towards life than it was before. And that's an outdated interest of mine. As current interests, so you look at how I spend my current week. Board games has become a more interesting part of my week. Do love understanding strategy and how to beat people and be competitive. Like that's a different form of competition rather than putting that towards sport. Soon interests, so ones that you're going to explore in the future. About to move house in 2 days' time. So there's a lot of different interests that I'm excited to explore and understand more about. So they're in my soon category. And then there's the ideal interests. So these are the ones if there were no limits on time, money, or self-belief, what would you do? So if you took away all the different restrictions. There might be like a skydiving or being a pilot or something else that you feel is really inexpensive or out of reach, or that you perhaps don't even know about yet as well. So these are the five types of interests. And if we were here in person, I would get you to pull out loads of post-it notes. I literally have loads in my drawer. I did this exercise the other day, so maybe you can see me. You can see that I've actually literally done this because I was updating my own interests and categories. So this is what I do normally would be to pull out your interests and to literally put them into like different post-it notes that you can then see in front of you. And then the following action would be for us to combine them together. What I'll do instead, and what I've done to make it simple for us to do virtually, is I've given myself as the example. Yeah. So these are my many interests, and these are the ones that are on these post-it notes in front of me. So very real. You can see it physically. There's a whole lot here, yeah? And I'll read out a few of them so you can make sense of them. And this is almost quite revealing, this is showing who I am to you all. But love, yeah, love community building. I wouldn't have talked about that early. Connecting people, workshop facilitation, reading biographies of leaders. Right now, I've got Martin Luther King that I'm reading about, which is really cool. Like his story is very interesting. Then there's like wild camping. Went to the Lake District with a friend a couple of weeks ago and literally wild camped. And it was really beautiful. Cycling, still love cycling. Um, Org design, future of work, wealth inequality, like all this stuff are like interests that I have or interests that I've done or ones that I want to explore in the future. And so this is what we get would be like a stack of like say 50 to 100 cards of interest that you'd have in front of you, and that's like me giving you permission. Yeah, like you have permission then to explore these interests, but also it can feel overwhelming, like how you have time for all these interests is going to be the next question that follows. So when you've seen them all, we then start to build the foundations. So from those interests, we want to form the categories. So how do they connect? How do they form into a bigger stack worth following? So when you overlap your interest into categories, you're looking for the bigger forms of them. So you're looking for the themes, the shared perspectives, and large containers. So here, what I've seen the people do in the workshops I've led is that they will go for like, oh, I like hiking, I like running, I like triathlon, so I must like sports. And that isn't a super useful way of describing the category. It's not untrue. I'm sure you like sports to a certain degree, but by being more specific, it makes it a lot more helpful. So here, I'm sure there's some kind of sports that you don't like. Okay, so what is it about the ones you do like that you enjoy the most? Oh, it's because they're adventure sports. Ah, okay, nice. So we've got a lot more of a tighter kind of category that leaves us room to grow, but offers us a focus too. So yeah, look for the lateral categories like sustainable living, strategic architecture. Like look for your words. The more you can be specific in your words, the easier this gets because it gives you clarity of what do I want to do next? What do I want to explore afterwards? And so it's a lot simpler once you've got that. And you've asked yourself, why do I like this? Until you find the threads that connect. So yeah, why do I like this thing? Why do I like it? Why do I like it? Why? And you'll find eventually that you get to the root cause of it. And so here we go. Here's my interests, and this is basically what's stacked in front of me on the post-it notes. But you can see here the intimate spaces is the way I've described community building, connecting people, workshop facilitation, deep chats, solving loneliness, and retreat hosting. And then strategic transitions is how I've described strategy games, competitive sports, biography of leaders, nonfiction frameworks, blah, blah. And I'm sure you can read the rest and so on and so on. But you can see the categories on the left that I've got to are intimate spaces, strategic transitions, immersive adventures, expressive writing, and empowering systems. And some of them I give higher weight to. So in the beginning, I'm not saying all of these categories. And some of them I keep to be intentionally unpaid versus other ones I keep to be intentionally paid and monetized. And there's times where that flexes and transitions and changes, and I'll tell you a little story in a moment. But you can see here that this gives me grouping, it gives me clarity for okay, it's not just that I like hiking. It's not just that I like cycling, it's that I like immersive adventures. Okay, cool. I've immersive adventures is what calls to me. I need a part of that in my life in a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly routine for me for myself to feel aligned to it. So yeah, we now have these categories and what do we do with them? So staying semi-professional is smart. So often you are told be pro in one thing. Commit your entire life. Like, here's the athlete that won gold at the Olympics. Let's all listen to their story. And there is, of course, incredible stories to listen to from those that have committed their entire lives to it. but you forget that there are many more who also competed for the exact same spot on the podium, but came second and got silver, or third and got bronze, or perhaps didn't even make it on the podium in the first place. All those people have committed their entire life to the same thing, yet you're only told of the successor bias of the ones that actually win. So forget, or don't forget that there is many trade-offs to committing to exactly one thing, and that forces you to give up your entire identity to obsess to beat other people because you are being compared at your ability to do that exact same category as someone else. So that's the identity obsession of the professional. And then, of course, the amateur is you just feel like you're mediocre at everything. Like, how do I get good at one thing? So there's definitely a sweet spot in between where you're semi-pro at a few things. And when you combine together, you have yourself differentiated in a category of one with no competition. You're no longer being compared to someone else who's also a world-class, say, runner. Everyone's a runner in some degree, but there are loads of people that are incredible professional runners. Wow, okay, that's a pretty hard category to win at. So let me tell you my story from endurance sports. This will bring this to life a little bit. So that's a good start. It started, well, I'll tell you a little bit of background before we get to that bit. But I started running when I was 14. And then, as I said earlier, I went to Loughborough University in 2016, 4 years there. And everyone there is insane at sport. So you go from having joined 14 as one of the worst ones, left as vice captain of a run club at 18, and then going to university and being like, oh, I'm back to being one of the worst ones. So then you humble yourself and you go through 4 years there. And then afterwards, this is 2020 now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, what sport do I want to take on next? How do I expand the scope so it's not just running for the rest of my life? And I had on my list of dream goals or things I wanted to achieve was an Ironman. And so I set myself a challenge to do an Ironman in the summer of 2022. I then had my bike that I had all like throughout life and trained on that over winter and did the swing. Obviously, I was quite a good runner at that point, so I could combine that into it. And then went out to Mallorca on a training camp in May 2022. And because I've shown you the next transition, you know where this is going. Out there, I got a bit overconfident. I was given a carbon bike, which anyone into cycling will know is rather light and makes you rather confident. And so took the hills pretty quickly and then came down the other side at around the switchbacks at sort of 60 kilometers an hour, which is pretty quick for going around these different corners. And basically, one of them, I couldn't turn fast enough and had to make the decision of either I hit the brakes and I lean into the road and scrape my entire body, or I hit the crash barrier and go over the edge. And I chose a ladder, so I hit the crash barrier and went over the edge, and then managed to crawl up from the side. And this is me literally on the side of the road on a cliff in Mallorca. Had some friends with me, so I wasn't alone. That helped. Put me in an ambulance, took me to hospital, put me into MRI, did all the scans, and they said to me, okay, the only thing that's broken is your little finger. Everything else is just heavily bruised and will heal. And if you prove you can walk, then you can go home. And even though I was morphined up and, rather drugged at that point, I was like, right, I can walk. So proved I could walk, went back to the hotel, and I then had this massive cast on my entire arm that was a bit dramatic for just a little finger. But it then, yeah, rested by the poolside all week and then had to make a decision around my Ironman that was in July of that year. And it was either do I just do it and cross a line, or do I defer by a year and train harder and go stronger? And I decided, okay, I want to do it to the best of my abilities. So I deferred by a year and got a pro coach. He was a silver medalist at the Commonwealth Games to train me. I went in like 15, 20 hours a week. Yeah, I'm like committed. This is like my evenings, my weekends. I'm working 4 days a week at that time, but I am like, yeah, all the rest of my time goes into sport. And so for about like, what, sort of 9 to 12 months, all I sort of do is eat, sleep, sport, work, repeat. And at that point is pretty all consuming. And this is like only 15, 20 hours a week. Yeah. Like the professionals in the world go even more insane than that. And so when it came time the following year, I actually went out to Mallorca the following year, went around the same routes and saw that spot that I'd crashed the previous year. So that was quite a nice sort of event to go back to. But then in July, I had the race and I did it. I built up my mind as big race. I got overconfident on, it has to be like sub 10 hours to the Ironman. This is like one of the hilliest courses, Ironman UK. And so I did it and crossed the line. And here I am in July 2023. I'm UK, and to myself, I'm like, oh, okay, crossed the line, but how does it feel? And straight after that, it felt rather empty. Yeah, like, was that the point? And I comforted myself with the idea that the actual work from this was, 99% of the work for the race comes before it. The 1% of the race is the cherry on top. That's the fun bit. That's the victory lap. But actually, deep down, there was a sort of feeling of, what's the point? Like, why am I doing this on repeat, and where is it all taking me? And at first, not sure I'd learned my lesson, and so I'd managed to qualify previous year as well to do London Marathon for 2024. So on that journey, I was like, okay, let's go all in. I know I'm a good runner. I can hit the time that I want to do in the running. I set myself a target of 2 hours 30 at the London Marathon in 2024. And I documented my entire process, was very kind of open on social media with it in particular, and said like that was my goal. Also got sponsored along the way. So that was pretty cool. I actually had someone pay me 2.5K to share about my story of, being a runner and why do I run and featuring their brand. Pretty cool. So you can monetize some of these areas of your life if you want to. Um, and along that journey, then, and I built this big hype, and then London Marathon came, and first half, 1 hour 14:49. So we're bang on pace, yeah. Like we're feeling good. And then the second half, it hits the inevitable wall at 32K and running along the embankment, which if you've been to London Marathon or seen it, it's a pretty overwhelming noise of people cheering at you while you're going backwards. I mean, not quite literally, but very much so. And my pace graph goes from a very, very like nice, consistent up to like 30K, and then goes ooh, all the way down. But then something in me is like, okay, maybe I should just bring it home and be proud of what I've done. And the pace goes back up towards the end. So I get 2 hours 40. So I'm 10 minutes off my time. Part of me is unhappy. Okay, I'm ruining myself. I forget what the next reveal is. Part of me is unhappy with that, but I find that actually for me, like I managed to reframe it a little bit. And I'm like, okay, you know what? 2 hours 40 by all measures is a good time. Like I should be happy with that. And I kind of find my peace with it a little bit more. And then I know that September I've can represent GB in triathlon from some of the competition I did the previous year. And so I take the next sort of like 3 months and I'm like, okay, just enjoy training. Yeah. Just do it, have fun, show up to the race. You've already got the vest, like nothing really matters here. Just go and do your best. And so I do that, show up, and even though I managed to like fall off my bike in the race because it was really slippy around a corner, classic, I've got a bit of a theme here, but I managed to do that and I was fine. Finished the race and look at this smile, yeah. Look at that's the smiling guy versus the previous ones, a lot more serious, a lot more like heavy. I actually really enjoyed that race. And I enjoyed that because I took the pressure off. I didn't make it so I had to win or had to do a certain time or a certain place. I just had to finish it in a way that I was proud of. And I was proud of myself for that race. And that felt, yeah, really satisfying. And so this might not sound like I learned my lesson, but the following year I then decided to sign up for an ultra marathon. So in May, the following year in 2025, went out to France, and I basically did 113K, like 4,200 meters elevation. And this time I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to my body. If my body tells me to slow down, to rest, then I will do that as well as I will have fun and enjoy myself too. And in that race, I remember pulling into aid station about 87K in, and I was there with my support crew, and I went over to the medic team, and I was like, "Oh, my lungs, I don't feel like I can breathe very well." And he was like, "Oh, I think that's because you just pushed the last section too hard. Just chill out for a bit." And so I sat in the aid station for an hour and a half. And for a guy who's been obsessed with like minutes beforehand, that's insane thing to do. And so I basically rested there, put on a blanket, spoke to my team, and had some gummy bears, and then put my head torch on, finished the race, and outsprinted someone over the line. So I managed to do both. Yeah, I had that competitive side of myself, but I also had the side that could listen to when I needed to rest as well. And I felt fully integrated at that point. And that I feel is some of the trade-offs that come with professionalizing yourself into a single identity, but also when you can learn and embrace being semi-professional as something instead. So yeah, that was what I learned from endurance sports and why now it's immersive adventures rather than endurance sports. Okay, so what does it look like for you? How do you apply this to your life? So this is kind of like your zones of professionalism. So at the beginning, 1 to 5 hours is sort of your amateur zone. So if you're doing it like an hour a week, then it's pretty amateur. But if you're up to the sort of 6 to 20 hours a week, then you're kind of getting pretty good at this. Yeah, you're now pretty consciously competent. You kind of know you're good, but you're not necessarily aiming to be the best in the world. You're just aiming to be pretty good at it to the extent in which you can. And then you get into the professional zone. So this is when you become like unconsciously competent. You start thinking about mattresses that save you 0.5% on your sleep score. And you start obsessing over all the minor details to increase performance. If you speak to anyone of the British cycling team, you'll learn what professionalism looks like and how that intrudes on the rest of your life. But you end up chasing marginal gains because the graph, the start to flatten out, and your marginal gains come a lot harder to get without putting more time and effort into it. And so you have to give your entire self to the identity. And so how does this apply? How do we then bring this into the ideal hours a week? So if you had mapped out your interests and had the categories together, I would then ask you to have, let's assume there's 160 hours in a week. We'll take out 68 for eating and sleeping. 100 hours is a nice number. So using that, how do you divide it across the different categories that you have? And so this is my own version. If you had your own post-it notes in front of you, you would do your own version. And you'd see that, okay, empowering systems to me is pretty important, as is intimate spaces, as is strategic transitions. They are more important to me and things that I want to lead with and ideally make money from. But immersive ventures and expressive writing, they're a little bit less. And again, this changes in that writing was a bigger part of my last chapter. Writing a book takes a lot of time. But for this chapter, it's a bit more of a sustaining area as well. So mapping these areas helps us know what your ideal life looks like in this current chapter. And so if you had them in front of you, that's what we would do. And then your golden thread, appreciate I've got 9 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep this short. We first look at how we can design your life with purpose. So rather than picking a job title, like Ikigai would ask you to have a specific job that's going to be your perfect role. It's going to solve every problem that you ever have. Instead, we're being realistic here. Yeah, we're looking at what's your purpose statement that you can be met across several roles or offers or different parts of your life. And so that is what a golden thread does. It brings together those categories of interest that you have and it disconnects them from a single company, client, or role, and you aim to live aligned to it, even if it doesn't pay in the short term as well. So that's the golden thread. And how do you articulate it? Well, you've seen a little bit of my own example from the beginning. I have a few more to share with you, but it's I help someone. Who is this? Who is the person that you feel most called to? Who's one that you can't help yourself from helping? And who is it that everyone tells you that you're such a great person at helping them about? Like there's definitely a who in your life. And that who, like we see in the chat from the beginning, could be broadly women in one of the cases, or it could be like, and it's a super like ambitious women. Is there like a term of women that you feel at a certain stage, young women? Like if you give us another label to it, it will help you narrow down even a little bit more. So you find out exactly who it is that you help. And that could be someone at a certain stage. They might be starting their journey. It might be a certain age. There might be other qualifiers that you add to it. But the better way to understand it is like, can you get in their head and understand their goals and ways they can bring it to life? So there's the who, then there's the how. So how do you help them? So this is the advice you keep giving, the conversations you love having. So it's the transformation that's delivered at the end of when you help someone. And then the through is the what you provide. So this is the categories. So you saw on my own, there's like the intimate spaces, which show up as community building. And there's some of the strategic transitions that shows up in like this work and the workshops. And so this is bringing together those categories into your statement as well. A couple of examples. People that I've actually coached, and these are we got to as their golden threads. So in Jason's case, I helped the audacious to impress their values onto social environments through understanding intrinsic motivators, building confidence rooted in mastery, and exercising symbiotic leadership. A lot of words. What does that mean? Basically, he helps those who are in the workplace, particularly as new managers, how do they establish themselves and how do they impress their values onto those environments too? And doing that through intrinsic motivators, confidence in mastery, and symbiotic leadership. So that explains him. And then Matt's more of a B2B focus. So I help high adrenaline boundary testing visionaries to build market leading brands that challenge the status quo through understanding individual perspectives, creating revenue generating strategies, and iterating based on feedback. So they're his unique approaches to that persona and how he helps them as well. So how do you make this unique? How do we find your words for this? So you look for the who beyond the labels. So what are their shared ambitions, their struggles, and their worldviews? And then the how and the transformation. When you're done, how will they feel, what they think, what they do? And then what's the what in your unique approach? What can you provide that no one else can? And that often comes from your categories. So as a reminder, this is what I do, and this is how I've made sense of myself when I explain it, but also how the golden thread connects it all is, like I said at the beginning, I help those who live beyond labels, the undefinables, to design their life for uniqueness through intimate spaces, strategic transitions, and empowering systems. And you can see the different parts of my life and work that this shows up in as well. Okay, 5 minutes. Would love for you to add back into the chat now, and then I'll have some time for questions. A updated version of the answer to what you do. And I'd love for you to, if you can, use a bit of the formula of the golden thread of I help someone to do something through providing something else. And I'll read out a couple of them and maybe give you some suggestions too. But I think, yeah, let me just pause here and I'll see if anyone jumps in. But I'll leave you do that. I'll let you add into the chat and I'll collect them at the end. But let me just wrap this up while I do this. So, undefinable ascent, how does this come together? You've seen today stages 1 to 3 of the Purpose Acropolis. You've seen the materials, the foundation, the keystone. What's left is the roof and the pillars. So the signature expression is like how you bring this to life, your design principles, your roof. So your pillars are your value streams. So that would be the next stage that we go through in the Purpose Acropolis. The energy toolkit is then how do we sustain ourselves to climb? So you imagine yourself, you've plotted the destination at the end, you're then in the foothills at the beginning and need to navigate towards that destination. How do you sustain yourself? And that's formed of the boots, is how you listen to your body. When they tell you to push on or stop, you get blisters. Sometimes you plaster it up, sometimes you just keep pushing. Then there's a flask. So how do you feel yourself with purpose, profit, and play? Stopwatch, how do you pace your ascent? So how do you sometimes be walking, jogging, sprinting, and also intentionally resting different parts of yourself? So there's categories that we saw before. Maybe I'm resting more of my immersive adventure side, but I could be sprinting more on some of the intentional or strategic transitions. And then we look at the ice axe, so how do you anchor yourself to different environments? And then the field guide is how do you learn from mentors who've walked the path before you. And this is a lot about what we do here. And then the income pathway, so you're now at the beginning, and the steps towards that ideal life are as follows. First, you get to base camp, you save your runway, you save enough in time and money towards your ascent. Then you plant your flag, you find your first 100 advocates who care about your golden thread. Then you get a foothold, you sell them a offer, an experiment until it resonates. Then you construct a beacon. The beacon signals your credibility and signposts the value that you add. And then you signpost your value. So that's step 5, where you can price it in different ways. So beyond just time, you can sell outcomes, you can sell equity. And then finally, you construct a stairway, which prioritizes your time towards the final ascent there as well. So they are the steps, and that's all in my book as well. So if you've enjoyed today and found value from thinking about life design through this lens, then definitely pick up the book Undefinable Life Design. You can see here the launch part on the left, pretty cool bunch of people, and it's been featured in Forbes, Amazon bestseller, 38 5-star reviews. Lots of people send me some nice things all the time. Didn't think I saw like 300 plus sales in 2 months, so we're off to a good start. But yeah, we'd love for you to continue your journey as well. And I'll hopefully use the last 2 minutes just to view some of the questions or some of the different golden threads in the chat as well. But yeah, I think this will go out afterwards. Okay, cool. Thank you all for being here and for listening to me. Appreciate it as well. Let's have a look. Let's see what we've got in the chat.
Thank you, Charlie. That's been very insightful. I think there's one question in the chat and there's one in the Q&A as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'll read the one in the chat first. That's what I'm going to see. Maria, how are you able to blend your story with your framework in your book? Any tips on organizing the book? I'll buy it so I can see. Yeah, I mean, buy the book. That's a good starting point. But it went through 5 versions. I self-published, so I had about 100 people read it before it went live. So at every stage, about 20 people came through it. I started with the closest in my network, so those who understood what I was trying to write about. Those that were in the community was the easiest starting point for me. And then I went wider and wider and wider. So those that have heard of it or I've worked with in different ways, and then those that know of me, and then those that don't know me. Each time I went wider, and that helped me stay true to what I was writing about at the beginning, because those that were closer to me, when it's sort of earlier stages, more nascent, it's more important that you're like true to yourself. But also knowing that the feedback, when people give it to you can only view it through the lens of they can tell you the problem, but you have to deliver the solution. So one of the things I had back in my first round of feedback was, put your story at the beginning, 5 people said that independently of like the 20 people that read it. And I was like, I don't think that's what they're saying, yeah? They're saying, offer me credibility for why I should listen to you earlier. They're not saying put your story. The recommendation of putting the story earlier is the solution. I, the author, get to choose the solution, but what's the problem they're saying? The problem is saying, I want more credibility from you earlier. Okay, great. So what I did was I put an undefinable CV at the beginning where I kind of broke down sort of my 27 years of life and in 2 sentences per year. And I was like, okay, these are all the undefinable things that I've done since like 13. And that helped give some credibility of why I'm relatively undefinable. And so that was super helpful. Other tips I'd say is depends on what book you're writing, but I'd say read Rob Fitzpatrick's Write Useful Nonfiction book. Insanely good and super useful, and really helped me to understand how to view how to view the book through a really engaging lens and a really powerful framework part to it as well. And I only actually got the undefinable ascent in the final version in V5. In that it was disconnected before. It had like different ways of them coming together. I thought the model was just purpose, but actually it's the energy and income as well, and they all fit into this bigger narrative and cohesive, immersive adventure. And so each time you iterate, you get closer to it. And I think when you find the backbone of the book, is what I ended up calling it, which kind of connects it all. I knew when I had the undefinable ascent in that frame that that was the formula that I would want to bring to market. And so when you find the backbone of the book, that's when you can really put it out there into the world. Cool. Hopefully that answers your question, Maria. Feel free to follow up if you need to. And then Alice, you offer one-to-one coaching. I do. It's on my website. There's a link on there for a sort of 25-minute, half an hour chat where we can understand where you're at and if we can work together as well if I'm a good person for you. So all on the website. I will chuck that in the chat for you so you've got it. But yeah, would love to continue the conversation, hear where you're at, and get you a bit more clarity on where you're going next. So I'll just put the for individuals. And then, yeah, scroll down to the bottom on this for the coaching, but the book's also on there too. Cool. Am I missing anyone here, or is that who I've got?
I think that's all the questions for now, unless one's just come through. No, that's everything. But yeah, I'd just like to say thank you again to Charlie for sharing your experience and advice with us today. And thank you for everyone that joined on the here. So if you're new to Graduate Mentor, we have loads of mentors you can choose from to help you in your career. So you can register on our website and get free advice. Yeah, thank you.